An aggressive biker hit an elderly black woman in a roadside diner, completely unaware that boxing legend Mike Tyson was sitting just a few feet away. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It all started in a place that felt frozen in time. Mildred's Diner sat quietly on the edge of a busy highway, its neon lights flickering like they were daring the years to keep passing. It was one of those old-school spots where truckers refueled on black coffee, families paused during road trips, and locals came just to remember what the world used to feel like. Inside, it was all chrome edges, red leather booths, and a jukebox playing soft hits from the 60s. The air smelled like bacon and coffee, and the gentle clinking of dishes mixed with quiet chatter made the whole place feel like a warm memory. Behind the counter, a tired-eyed waitress traded small talk with a trucker working on scrambled eggs. In the corner, a family with two giggling kids shared a milkshake, and at another table, a trio of teens were glued to their phones, whispering jokes. It was just a regular afternoon, nothing loud, nothing wild. But for Miss Ruth, this diner meant more. It was a peaceful stop on a long ride home, a kind of ritual. She stepped inside wearing a bright cardigan and a gentle smile, nodding at the waitress who greeted her like an old friend. "Your usual spot, Miss Ruth?" She nodded and headed to the booth by the window. In her 70s, Miss Ruth moved with quiet elegance, her leather purse resting neatly on her shoulder. She had the kind of calm strength that comes from living through a lot and standing tall anyway. That day, she was coming back from visiting her grandkids. It had been a beautiful weekend, but the long bus ride left her a little worn out. Still, here at Mildred's, with a cup of Earl Grey tea and a slice of peach pie on the way, she felt like she was home. Not far from her, tucked quietly in a booth near the back, sat a man in a gray tracksuit, hood up, chewing slowly on a burger. It was Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion, keeping to himself, unnoticed by most. For Mike, diners like this offered rare peace. No cameras, no questions. Just quiet. Just normal. But even in peace, Mike's eyes stayed sharp. He noticed Miss Ruth. There was something about the way she carried herself. She reminded him of his mother, strong, graceful, unshaken. A presence, even in silence. Then, the bell above the door jingled. 4 bikers stepped in. At first, nothing seemed out of place: leather jackets, heavy boots, patches on their backs. But their energy changed the air. They laughed too loud, moved too confidently. And at the front of the pack was Roy, a tall man with a scar down his cheek, scanning the diner like he owned it. They picked a booth in the center of the room, and without even trying, they silenced it. The family with the kids glanced nervously. The teens put their phones down. Even the waitress hesitated. Miss Ruth, lost in her tea, barely noticed until Roy's voice cut through the room. She looked up, and their eyes met. What happened next? Mike Tyson saw it all. Well, look at that," Roy said with a crooked smile, his voice slicing through the diner like a knife. "We got ourselves a queen by the window." His boys burst out laughing, the kind of laugh that made your skin crawl. It wasn't funny. And everyone knew it. Miss Ruth didn't flinch. She calmly returned her eyes to her tea, like he didn't even exist. In the back booth, Mike Tyson looked up just slightly. He didn't move. Not yet. But something about the energy shifted, and Mike, whose instincts had been honed in both the ring and the street, felt it in his bones. This situation was heading the wrong way. Roy leaned back in his seat, arms stretched across the booth like he owned the place. "What's the matter, Grandma?" "Too good to look at me," he sneered. But behind that grin was something uglier. Something looking for trouble. Miss Ruth didn't give him what he wanted. She lifted her teacup, steady as stone, and took a slow, deliberate sip. She'd seen men like Roy before, and she knew exactly how they fed off fear. The room went still. Conversations died out. People pretended to eat, to look away, but they were all watching, just trying not to show it. Behind the counter, the waitress froze mid-step, a tray shaking slightly in her hands. Roy's smirk twitched. He wasn't used to being ignored. "I'm talking to you," he snapped, this time louder. Still no reaction. So he slammed his hand on the table, hard. The plates rattled. Someone gasped. Finally, Miss Ruth looked up. Calm. Unshaken. "I don't believe we've been introduced, young man," she said, her voice steady. "If you'll excuse me, I'd like to enjoy my tea in peace." Roy's crew chuckled again, but it wasn't confident anymore, it was nervous, shaky. Even they could feel the shift. In the back, Mike Tyson's fingers curled around the edge of his table, his knuckles turning pale. He didn't move, but he was locked in now. Watching. Calculating. Roy leaned forward again, his grin returning, but colder this time. "You got a lot of nerve, lady. Don't you know who you're talking to?" Miss Ruth didn't blink. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm talking to," she said. "Someone who thinks making a scene makes him important." The entire diner held its breath. Mike's eyes narrowed. Roy's smile faded. His hand twitched, like it wanted to grab something, say something, do something. Mike didn't know what was coming next. But he knew one thing for sure, if this man made one wrong move, it was already too late for him. "Hey boys, check this out," Roy called out, loud enough to slice through the quiet of the diner. He pointed straight at Miss Ruth's booth. "Looks like we got ourselves a queen over there. What's the occasion, Grandma? Tea party?" His voice was sharp, his laugh even sharper, raw and aggressive, echoed by his crew in a chorus of mean-spirited chuckles. Miss Ruth didn't react. She gently set her teacup back on the saucer. Her hands were steady. Calm. Like none of this was new to her. Like she'd seen this kind of man before and already knew how to deal with him. She didn't look up. Didn't feed his ego. But Roy wasn't used to being ignored. He nudged the guy next to him, a wiry man with a crooked grin and eyes that flicked around nervously. "What do you think?" Roy said. "Should we join her? Maybe she'll teach us some manners." The man laughed, but it was a weaker sound now. Uneasy. Even the group could feel something wasn't right. Roy stood up. Took a step toward Miss Ruth's booth. The entire diner held still. Every set of eyes followed him, some pretending not to look, others frozen in place. The waitress shifted behind the counter but didn't move. No one did. "Excuse me," Roy said as he leaned against the edge of Miss Ruth's table. His voice was laced with fake politeness, but the thread underneath it was loud and clear. "You look a little out of place, lady. This ain't exactly a tea lounge. More of a beer and burger kind of joint." Finally, Miss Ruth looked up. Her face was serene, her voice steady. "I wasn't aware this diner had a dress code or a clientele requirement," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to enjoy my tea." Roy's grin stretched, but there was no humor in it anymore. Just challenge. Across the room, Mike Tyson watched. Quiet. Focused. He could feel Roy's energy shift, turning meaner by the second. Roy leaned in closer, lowering his voice but sharpening its edge. "You think you're better than me, huh? Sitting there all proper like you run the place?" Miss Ruth didn't flinch. Her gaze didn't budge. "I've dealt with men like you my whole life," she said quietly. "And I'm still here. That should tell you something." The room tightened. Even Roy's friends looked uneasy. One of them leaned in. "Roy, maybe we just sit down. Food's probably almost here." "Shut up," Roy snapped, never breaking eye contact with Miss Ruth. "I'm just having a little fun." And that's when it happened. A single word, low, quiet, but with the force of a thunderclap. "Enough." Roy turned, startled. Mike Tyson had risen from his booth. He walked slowly, deliberately, toward the center of the diner. Step by step, the room's attention shifted entirely to him. No one said a word. Roy blinked, thrown off. The man approaching him was calm but massive, every movement measured, every step echoing authority. "Who the hell are you?" Roy asked, trying to puff himself back up. "You got a problem?" Mike stopped a few feet away. His hands were relaxed at his sides. His hood still up. His voice was low, calm, unshaken. "Leave her alone." The silence was crushing. Even Roy's crew didn't move. Their eyes bounced from Roy to Mike, like they weren't sure what planet they were on anymore. Roy barked out a laugh. "What are you, her bodyguard?" "Sit down, old man, mind your business." Mike didn't blink. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't even change his tone. "I said, leave her alone." This time, there was no mistaking the message. The weight of those words hit Roy like a punch to the pride. He stared at Mike, finally seeing him. Not just a big guy in a tracksuit, but a man who could move like lightning if he had to. A man who'd been in more dangerous situations than Roy could imagine. Roy's confidence cracked, just for a second. But it showed. One of his boys whispered, "Roy, let it go, man. It's not worth it." Roy shook it off, trying to recover, his pride burning. He stepped closer, raising his voice. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Mike didn't move. His body was still, but every muscle was ready. He looked Roy dead in the eye. "I'm just a guy telling you to stop bothering her. That's all." The whole diner waited. Even the jukebox seemed quieter now. "A guy, huh?" Roy sneered, stepping closer. "Let me tell you something, pal, nobody tells me what to do. Nobody." He jabbed a finger toward Mike's chest. Didn't quite touch him. Something about the way Mike stood, the stillness, the quiet control, made Roy pause just short of crossing the line. The room was suffocating now. The tension so thick it felt like it might crack the windows. Behind the counter, the waitress inched forward, pale and visibly shaken. "Sir," she said quietly, voice trembling, "please, let's not turn this into something ugly." Roy ignored her. He leaned in even closer to Mike, his tone dropping into something low and dangerous. "You think you're tough, huh? Hiding under that hood, acting all calm?" One of his friends tried again, this time more urgently. "Roy, stop. Look at him." But Roy was too far gone. Ego blind. Pride boiling. He jabbed his finger again, this time brushing against Mike's chest. "What are you gonna do, tough guy? You think you scare me?" Mike didn't blink. Didn't raise his voice. "Last chance," he said evenly. "Walk away." Roy's laugh came sharp, and then just as quickly, it stopped. His face twisted with frustration, and suddenly, he lunged forward, aiming a clumsy shove toward Mike's chest. It was a mistake. In a flash, Mike shifted his weight, stepped aside, and caught Roy's wrist midair. With one precise movement, he twisted it, just enough to lock Roy in place, not enough to break it. Roy gasped, stumbling back as Mike let him go. "Don't," Mike said. Calm. Controlled. "You're not ready for this." Humiliation spread across Roy's face. Rage followed. "You think you're tough?" he spat, eyes wild. "Let's see how tough you are." He swung, a wide, sloppy punch, all noise and no skill. Mike didn't even blink. He ducked under it with effortless grace and stepped in. A quick, controlled jab to Roy's gut, nothing brutal, just enough to knock the wind out of him. Roy doubled over, gasping for air, his arms clutching his stomach. Then chaos broke loose. Roy's crew scrambled to their feet. Chairs screeched. One of them, a thick, heavy-set guy, charged at Mike, throwing a wild haymaker. Mike sidestepped, clean and sharp, and landed a clean shot to the man's shoulder. The biker spun out, lost his balance, and crashed into a table. Another one, smaller, quicker, tried to rush from the side. Mike saw him coming. He caught his wrist, locked it, twisted, and pushed. The guy dropped to the floor, groaning, hands clutching his arm. Only one was left now, the wiry one with the crooked grin. He looked at Mike. Then at the others, all groaning or down. He raised both hands and backed away. "I'm good. I'm good," he mumbled. Roy, still gasping for air, tried to stand. His face was red, equal parts fury and embarrassment. You don't know who you're messing with," he wheezed. Mike took a slow step toward him. Not threatening, just absolute. "No," he said quietly. "You're the one who doesn't know. If you don't walk away right now, you're gonna find out." The room held still. Not a breath, not a word. Just the quiet hum of the jukebox and the weight of what had just happened. Roy hesitated. Looked around. No backup. Just pain and judgment in every corner. With a muttered curse, he turned and staggered toward the door. His crew scrambled to follow. One of them limping. Another still clutching his shoulder. The door slammed behind them. And then, silence. The air returned to the room. People finally exhaled. The waitress leaned against the counter, trembling, trying to steady her breathing. Miss Ruth sat quietly, composed. She looked up at Mike and gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Mike turned to her, his eyes softening. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Nobody should have to deal with that." He reached down, picked up her purse from the floor, and handed it to her gently. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her hand still trembled slightly. "I will be, thanks to you." The room stayed quiet, still absorbing everything. The waitress finally spoke, her voice fragile but grateful. "Can I get you something?" "On the house." "For both of you." Mike shook his head. "Just make sure she's taken care of." He nodded toward Miss Ruth. "That's all that matters." The tension in the diner finally began to ease. Whispers replaced silence. People exchanged glances, some filled with awe, others with quiet gratitude. The quiet man in the hoodie, once tucked into a corner booth, had revealed himself to be something far more powerful than anyone expected. But Mike Tyson didn't care about the attention. It wasn't about being recognized. It wasn't about the applause. It was about doing what was right. And for him, that was enough. The air was still heavy, but not hostile. People began to relax, some turning back to their meals, others stealing glances at Mike as he stood by Miss Ruth's booth. For most, this had been the closest they'd ever come to a real confrontation like that, let alone one involving a living legend. But Mike seemed unfazed. His entire focus remained on Miss Ruth. She sat quietly now, hands resting on her lap, still trying to steady her breath. "Let's get you checked out," Mike said gently, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. "He shoved you pretty hard. You sure you're okay?" Miss Ruth gave a small nod. Her voice was soft, but she made it as steady as she could. "I'm fine. I've dealt with people like him before." Mike studied her for a second longer, his eyes narrowing as he noticed a faint bruise forming on her wrist. "You shouldn't have to," he said. His tone wasn't angry, it was quiet, grounded. The kind of voice that carries more weight than a shout ever could. The waitress finally approached, still visibly shaken. "Is there anything I can do for you, ma'am?" "Or for you, sir?" she asked, glancing nervously at Mike. Mike shook his head. "She could use some ice," he said, nodding toward Miss Ruth. "And maybe a fresh cup of tea." The waitress nodded quickly and disappeared behind the counter, grateful to have something, anything, to do. As she returned moments later with a small ice pack and steaming teapot, Mike helped Miss Ruth gently place the ice on her wrist. She winced but gave him a small, grateful smile. "You're very kind," she said. "But I have to ask, why? Why did you step in? Most people would have just stayed in their seats." Mike hesitated, his gaze drifting out the window. He looked like he was deciding how much of his past to share with a stranger. Finally, he spoke. I grew up around guys like Roy. Bullies. Loudmouths. People who think being loud makes them right. I've been on both sides of that. I know how it feels when no one stands up for you. He paused. I couldn't just sit there and watch it happen again. Miss Ruth tilted her head slightly, watching him. Both sides? Mike nodded. His face didn't give much away, but his voice did. I wasn't always someone who did the right thing. There were times I was the guy hurting people. Took me a long time to figure out who I wanted to be. She didn't press. She just nodded slowly. Well, she said softly, I'm glad you became the man you are today. Mike smiled. Not wide. Not showy. Just enough. Me too. Then, the sudden whine of a police siren pierced the moment. A patrol car pulled into the diner's lot, red and blue lights flashing. Every head turned. The waitress froze again. Nervous glances darted across the room. It wasn't every day the cops showed up at Mildred's. 2 officers entered. The older of the 2, a tall man with gray in his hair, scanned the room. His eyes landed briefly on Mike, and there was a flicker of recognition. But he kept his focus professional. Ma'am, he said to the waitress, we got a call about a disturbance. Can you tell us what happened? She nodded, explaining what took place in a shaky voice. She told them about the bikers, the harassment, the shove, and how Mike stepped in before things got worse. The officer turned to Miss Ruth next. Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need medical attention? She shook her head. I'm okay, thank you. Just a little shaken. Then his attention shifted to Mike. You're Mike Tyson, aren't you? Mike gave a small nod. Yeah. That's me. The officer looked uncertain. We've got witnesses saying you got into a physical altercation with one of the bikers. That true? Mike didn't flinch. I stepped in when he pushed her. I made sure he didn't go any further. That's all. The officer studied him, quiet for a long beat. Then nodded. All right, he said. We'll need to take statements from everyone, but based on what I'm hearing, sounds like you did the right thing. The tension in the diner began to melt away, like steam rising off a hot cup of coffee. Conversation slowly resumed. Plates clinked gently. But the energy in the room had changed. It wasn't fear anymore, it was something closer to quiet admiration. Respect. All eyes occasionally drifted back to Mike Tyson, not as a celebrity, not as a former champion, but as the man who chose to stand up when no one else did. Mike, however, wasn't soaking it in. He wasn't interested in praise. His attention was on Miss Ruth, who still sat in the same booth, her teacup cradled between trembling hands. Her posture had regained some of its grace, but the faint bruise on her wrist spoke louder than words. As the officers went around gathering statements, Miss Ruth glanced at Mike. Her voice was soft, but steady. You didn't have to get involved, you know. Mike tilted his head, his voice low but sure. Maybe. But if I hadn't, who would have stopped him? She gave him a faint smile, one filled with more gratitude than words could say. I'm glad you didn't stay quiet. A few minutes later, the lead officer, older, composed, approached them after finishing the interviews. We'll be looking for those bikers. If they come back, you call us immediately. Then, he paused, extended a hand to Mike. Thank you for stepping in. You don't see that every day. Mike shook his hand, his grip firm, steady. I just did what needed to be done. The waitress soon returned with another steaming pot of tea and a fresh slice of peach pie for Miss Ruth. On the house, she said with a warm smile. It was a small gesture, but one that carried the weight of appreciation. The diner began to breathe again. The normal rhythms resumed, but everyone knew they had witnessed something different that day. Something real. The kind of moment that stays with you, not because of violence, but because someone chose to do what was right. A short time later, the door opened again. 2 more officers entered, followed by a tall man in plain clothes. His presence was immediately noticeable, calm, confident, commanding. His badge glinted at his waist as he introduced himself. "Detective Harris," he said. "We're following up on the incident. Sounds like things got a little heated." The waitress stepped forward, still rattled. "It was the bikers," she said, voice shaking. "One of them attacked that lady. And if it weren't for him..." She pointed to Mike. "It could have been much worse." Harris turned to Mike, eyeing him carefully. "Mr. Tyson, it's not every day we get a call involving you." Mike stayed calm under the weight of attention. "I stepped in because she needed help." "That's it. Self-defense?" Harris asked. Mike nodded. He pushed her, grabbed her. "I stopped it from getting worse." Miss Ruth added her voice, now stronger. "He's telling the truth. Those men came in looking for trouble. Mr. Tyson only acted when they wouldn't leave me alone." Harris nodded slowly, absorbing it all. "We've heard similar things from other witnesses." He turned to the crowd. "If anyone hasn't spoken to my officers yet, now's the time." As more patrons came forward to tell their version of what happened, the story grew clearer. Unified. Honest. What Mike had done wasn't just brave, it was necessary. Then one of the younger officers approached Harris, holding a small evidence bag. Inside, a phone. "Found outside," he said. "Probably dropped by one of them." Harris inspected it closely. "If we're lucky, there might be footage." He turned to Mike and Miss Ruth. "If you're both willing, we'd like you to file official complaints. It'll help build the case." "I will," Miss Ruth said without hesitation, her tone resolute. Mike nodded. "Count me in." Harris gave them both a faint smile. "Good. You probably just gave us what we needed. But I'll be honest, those bikers don't like being crossed. If they figure out you were involved, they might try to retaliate." Mike's expression darkened, his jaw set. "Let them try." As the officers wrapped up their work and prepared to leave, Mike walked Miss Ruth to her car. The sun was setting, painting the parking lot in gold and tangerine. "I can drive myself home, you know," she said with a small smile. "I know," Mike replied. "But after a day like this, I'd feel better seeing you off." She gave him a knowing look. "I've been alone before. It doesn't scare me. But I appreciate it." Before she got in, Mike leaned down slightly. "You've got family nearby?" "My son and his wife live a few towns over. Grandkids are just a call away." "Then call them," he said. "They need to know what happened." She nodded, and as her car disappeared into the fading light, Mike remained still, watching. Thinking. He got into his car but didn't turn the key. Not yet. The diner's neon sign glowed behind him in the rearview mirror, and the sky overhead turned from orange to deep blue. He thought about his mother. About all the times she told him, "Use your strength for something good." And today, he had. Meanwhile, in her small home, Miss Ruth sat in her favorite chair, warm tea by her side. She called her grandchildren. "Grandma, are you okay?" one of them asked. She smiled. "I'm more than okay, sweetheart. Today, I was reminded there are still good people in the world." The story of what happened at the diner spread quickly. A tale of quiet strength and unexpected courage. A reminder that even in dark moments, someone can rise, not with force, but with purpose. Mike Tyson didn't plan to be a hero. But that day, in a dusty diner off a long stretch of highway, he chose to be one anyway. And that made all the difference. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in standing up for what's right. See you in the next one.